Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Me? I have that feeling that I normally get just before the arrival of Christmas, actually. I don't want to wish my life away, but I really, really wish it was next week. While my wife and son have been checking out about 472 restaurants they're planning to cram into the space of just 7 days, I've been going through the exhibitor list at ConExpo next week, and I've already conceded that I won't get to see everything I need to see. All those thoughts about this show being too close to Bauma and there being nothing new to report on gone completely out of the window, because there is an awful lot there that we need to report on. My biggest concern now is that I may miss something really important. I would do my best not to, and hopefully hook up with the likes of Nick Drew, who can tell me all the things that I am missing. Now, just a very quick reminder that today is a Tuesday, and that means I'm scheduled to go live on Instagram this afternoon. If I don't bore you to tears during this show, then perhaps I can try again at 2:30 over on Instagram. Now, without further ado, let me roll the intro, post the question of the day, get this show on the road. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I'm your host, Mark Anthony. It is Tuesday, the 7th of March, and welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, a Pennsylvania power station falls to the devastating power of controlled explosives. A US demolition company puts its faith in the Hyundai brand, and XCMG is on the final countdown for ConExpo 2023. Plus, Komatsu highlights the features and benefits of its new PC17R-5 mini excavator, and we're going to get to all of that in just a second. But first, let's see who among the rich and the shameless will be celebrating a birthday on this day of days. Happy birthday! And it's many happy returns to a Scottish folk hero. No, not Steve Williamson, not Gary Muirhead, not Callum McIntosh, but Rob Roy. Happy birthday also to zombie singer, Chris White, legendary West Indies batsman Viv Richards, Breaking Bad actor Bryan Cranston, and to the sadly departed comedian Rick Mail, to tennis star Ivan Lendl, actress Rachel Weisz, footballer Ray Parlour, and to Welsh dart star Gerwyn Price. Many happy returns to them, one and all. Now, before we get started, here's a very quick reminder of our question of the day. Yeah, slightly more serious than our usual fare. If you knew that one of your colleagues had arrived from work drunk or under the influence of drugs, would you report them? We'll be looking at that later in the show. And to be perfectly honest, I'm doing it for a very specific reason. Drugs and alcohol in the workplace is something I'm planning to talk about over on Instagram this afternoon. So fire over your feedback and let me know exactly what you think about all of that. Now, let's get this thing started, shall we? It's been a week or two since we last featured an explosive demolition event, which I know everybody loves. So I'm delighted that a Pennsylvania power station has come to our rescue and sacrificed itself for your viewing pleasure. Yeah, that was the Hatfields Ferry Power Station in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Pretty epic demolition. We're going to remain stateside and in the field of demolition right after this, or right after what's coming up. But I do want to hop over into the chat where we are talking about drugs and alcohol. I thought this was a very interesting take. First and foremost, good morning, JJ, whoever you are and wherever you're watching. No, I wouldn't report somebody under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I would talk to them and send them home or cover for them. And I think a lot of people would do exactly the same. Just while we're looking at that, let me just say, as it's your first time here, as far as I'm aware, JJ, thank you very much indeed for being here. There's your welcome confetti. And I do wonder if other people would do exactly the same thing. And if that is the case, just how aware are we of the numbers of people involved in abusing drugs and alcohol? If we're all covering for them, are we actually able to measure exactly what the situation is? Lots and lots of comments on that. I'm going to come back to all of those a bit later on, but let's save those for the chat afterwards. So I need to play something. I'm going to play one of these. Ahead of its appearance at the ConExpo show next week, Hyundai has been busy highlighting its presence in the US construction equipment market, where it has a growing following. And that following now extends over into the field of demolition too.
Hello, my name is Christina Cox and I work for United Demolition. Tonight we are in Atlanta, Georgia, working on a pretty big expansion here in Atlanta. We've been here now for a few months and we use quite a few of the Hyundai pieces of equipment. The Hyundai equipment is more durable than other brands. The cab space is luxury compared to some of the other brands that they have out there. Everyone seems to be satisfied and comfortable working long hours in these machines each and every day. We've got at least 3 pieces of Hyundai equipment on site that we use on a day-to-day basis, and so far they've held up great. We haven't had any issues with them. They're definitely worth the time and the money spent on the equipment, keeping them maintained. As long as you maintain them, they'll work for you, and they do last. Tonight we're going to be working with the 330L and the 235. It's going to be a long shift. We will start by removing the bridge deck, which is the actual road itself, and then we will move down and start removing the girders from down below using the 235, the 300, and the 335. I've been with United Demolition for 1.5 years, but been in the industry for about 20 years. Working out in the construction field, it is rewarding each and every day, learning new things, meeting new people, and get to travel and see the United States, not like many people have the chance to do working in an office job.
Yeah, really hope I get the chance to swing by the Hyundai stand at ConExpo, but I have to be honest, the diary is pretty much full. I'm going to do my best, but as Nick Drew has just said, ConExpo ConAg needs to run for 7 days, I feel. Not enough time to get around it all. That was certainly the case with Bauma. I realise Bauma is much bigger than ConExpo, but it is going to be one hell of a struggle to get around it all, but I will do my level best. I've been in training. I can run between stands if necessary. Watch this space. I first met XCMG face-to-face at ConExpo back in 2020, just before the world went completely barking mad. I worked with them at Bauma 2022, and this time next week, I'm due to work with them again. Yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up with the team at XCMG next week. They're doing some really innovative things over there in China, but I'm also keen to find out if they're planning to do anything right here in the UK. That was one of my predictions, the arrival of XCMG in the UK. That was one of my predictions for 2023. So I have a bit of a vested interest. Given the fact that none of my other predictions for 2023 are coming true, I might actually go over there and encourage them to head this way. Watch this space.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
And rounding out today's show is another of the companies that will be vying for the attention of visitors at the Las Vegas Convention Center next week, the mighty Komatsu. Although I'm looking forward to seeing their big wheel loaders and dozers, the company has released a number of new video clips that highlight the key features and benefits of some of the machines at the smaller end of their product range. Machines like this one. They really do make a very fine mini excavator. In fact, they make a very fine pretty much everything, I think you'll find.
Sorry to interrupt the guy with the funny glasses, but if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button as it helps our channel. Or, better still, share this video with a friend or a colleague. Thank you. Right, back to Beardy.
Right, that pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into the chat to see what you're all saying today. And I want to talk drugs and alcohol if you're available for that. If you can't stick around, then please stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Have a great day, and thanks for watching. But if you do have the time and the inclination, and if you have something to say, please stick around. I'll see you for the crack right after this. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How the devil are we all doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. It's cold out there this morning, so I hope you're all wrapped up nice and tight. Let's have a look through the chat before we get on to the main discussion point. Good morning, says Ken Hatcher, and yes, he has the cold. It is very, very cold out there. I had to pop out first thing this morning, and man alive, I was in a hurry, so I only wore a sweatshirt. Regretted that. Very, very cold out there. Steve Williamson's here as well. Morning, Steve. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Where are we now? Is it Tuesday? Yeah, it is Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 4 days. 4 days and counting, Steve, and I'll be seeing you at the airport. Gary Muirhead is here as well. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, gang. Good morning to you as well, Gary. Thank you very much indeed for being here. I'll have you know that last night, sweet and sour chicken, the diet version, last night for my dinner, accompanied by a damn fine can of root beer, courtesy of Mr. Muirhead. Thanks again, Gary. Nick Drew. Nick Drew's been absent for a few days. I'm hoping he's going to send a note from his mother. But good morning, Nick. Thank you very much indeed for being here. As always, Jim Turner's in the house as well. Good morning, Jim. Good morning, Jim, rather. Yes, this is the case. Just going to go to Steve Williamson there. This ConExpo 2023, it will be their biggest ever. Yes, it will. Obviously, there was a big question mark because Bauma last year was pushed back from sort of April time back to October. There was a concern that some of the major global manufacturers might have chosen one over the other and maybe gone with Bauma instead of ConExpo, that they would launch all their new equipment at Bauma rather than ConExpo, that some would stay away from ConExpo. Not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. And to the point where some of those that stayed away from Bauma, Case, Volvo, JCB, all at ConExpo. So yeah, a lot of catching up to do. Now, there was my question of the day. Would you report a colleague who arrived to work drunk or under the influence of drugs? Just before we get onto that in any real detail, I will tell you a tale from way back when I used to work on a magazine called Caterer and Hotel Keeper, long before I encountered all things construction. That music sounds a bit loud. Bear with me just 1 second. When I can find the damn stuff. Let's take that down. Just a touch. There we are. So yes, I was working on a magazine called Caterer and Hotel Keeper. So not only was this my pre-construction days, but it was also my pre-computer days. Everything was done manually back in the day. And we had a design layout artist who used to piece the pages together. A woman, probably late 50s, early 60s. And she had a ritual. She would arrive every morning, put her bag down, put her coat down, and then go off to the loo and come back with a jug. It was red, but it was metal. Like a copper jug, but it was red, actually painted red. Filled with what we all presumed was drinking water. And then one day, I'd been working with her for about 6 months at this point, and one day she just slumped over she had one of these upright work desks, just slumped over it. It turns out that her jug of water was actually a jug of gin. Quite how nobody had noticed at that point, I've no idea. So would you report a colleague under the influence? I'm going to get to that in just a second because my chat has just gone completely bonkers. Now then, where are we? We're back there. Okay, let's have a look. Get back to ConExpo. It is a massive show. Yeah, it really is. See, now here is the point, I think. Ken Hatcher, rightly, and I think I would probably do the same, tell him to go home. Nobody wants to be seen, we're going to come back to this in just a second, nobody wants to be seen as a grass. Nobody wants to be seen to be getting a colleague in trouble or anything like that. So I think there is going to be a large inclination of among the workforce to have a quiet word and say, look, you're not up to it. Before you get yourself fired, so take yourself home, sleep it off, and then come back. I think, as I say, I think that's exactly what I'd do. But if that's the case, are we fully aware of just how much of a problem this is? I know it's a question that Mick Norton raises on a fairly regular basis, the concerns over drugs and alcohol on site. But are we fully aware of just how much drugs and alcohol there is? If the entire workforce is covering for their work colleagues, have we even scratched the surface? Love to get your thoughts on that. ConExpo Craic needs to run for 7 days. Yes, although it is running. It's running from Tuesday to Saturday, and I'm planning to take the Saturday off because, you know, having dragged my family all that way, it seems only right and proper that I should actually see them as well. Jim Turner says he would definitely report a colleague who was under the influence. And again, I can't argue with that. Not necessarily what I would do, even though I know what I would suggest is wrong. Dan Cullen's in the house. Morning, Dan. Hope all well. Yeah, all well. Well, certainly all well here. There's our friend JJ, who is here for the first time, as far as I'm aware. I would talk to them and send them home or cover for them. Yeah, and I think a lot of people would do exactly the same thing. Question today, yes, I would 100%, says Dan Cullen, as that person is putting you and other lives in danger. All perfectly legitimate arguments. And I you know, it shouldn't come down to this, but I also wonder if that comes down to your relationship with the person. If they are one of your sort of long-term friends, you've been working with them for months, years, or possibly even decades, are you going to report them, or are you going to send them home? If there's somebody you've never met before and frankly is a bit of a pain in the arse, are you going to dob them in, as my dad used to say? Question of the day, Gary Muirhead. If we did, we would only have half the workforce left on site. There's not enough random DNA on site these days. You've got nothing to hide. You've got nothing to worry about. You know, that was the irony. As a lot of people know, I was on the HS2 site. There's a badge there to prove that I was on the HS2 site. It was this time last week, actually. Yeah, it was this time last week. And I had to go through a drugs and alcohol test, even though I was carrying a tripod. I wasn't really a danger to anyone, drunk or otherwise. I've not actually touched a drug in about 10 years, so I was perfectly okay, never in any doubt. Was it an inconvenience? Was a bit, but bearing in mind, I was only there for the day. If you're there for a prolonged period of time, doing a drugs and alcohol test on the day you start and then undergoing some random ones a bit further down the line, is it really that big a deal? I don't believe it is. Question of the day, Steve Williamson says, in an ideal world you would maybe go to your supervisor and say, and everything is confidential, but in this game, if you say anything, word will spread that you grass someone up and you can make your own time hell. I'd probably say to the guy, you need to go home. Toolbox talks in the morning, your site agent or supervisor will see for themselves. And I think that's one of the issues where we're talking more specifically about drugs rather than alcohol. I've said this before, you know, by and large, if somebody's been out on the lash and they arrive stinking of scotch or beer or whatever it might be, you would spot it a mile off. If they're coked up or if they're high on marijuana or something like that, are you really going to spot it? Not so easy, I don't think. Mark Whiting's in the house. Morning, Mark. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. As always, here's Mick Norton. Good morning, Mark. He says, morning to you, Mick, as well. And there's the other Mick, Mick Saunders. I would have a quiet word with them, asking them to do themselves a favour and go home. If not, yes. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, it was. I couldn't help thinking that the lady in question in that United Demolition video either had a very small head or a very large hat. Not that that's a problem. I happen to have a large head. I shouldn't be commenting on these things. Spotted our mate Gary Major in that clip. I'm assuming that was the XCMG roundup. There is, funnily enough, there is an XCMG film which I stumbled across completely by accident about a month ago. As I said, I met them first at, or face to face, I met them first at ConExpo in 2020, and they had a film crew. They had a Chinese film crew on the stand, and they asked me to do a very quick piece to camera. You know, what did I think of XCMG first time meeting them and all this? And I literally just had a bit of a walk around their 5-ton electric mini excavator, which, you know, was quite an impressive machine. So I came away feeling very positive. Somebody pointed a camera at me and I completely forgot all about it. And then lo and behold, in the run up to ConExpo this time around, the folks at XCMG have actually dredged up some of their footage from the last ConExpo, including this guy babbling on inanely. You can probably find it on YouTube. I wouldn't recommend it. As I showed you on WhatsApp group last night, 3 people using the same card on the site as these guys were in 3 different locations. Yeah, this falsification of cards and card fraud is going to be an ongoing problem. I sometimes turn up for these shows, and more specifically, I turn up for the Instagram Live, and I'm sat there thinking to myself, what can I talk about? And it's not because I haven't thought of anything, it's because there's too much. I'm going to say a very quick good morning. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but it's a newcomer over on YouTube, where we have a growing audience. Whoever you are or wherever you are, thank you very much indeed for being here. There is your welcome confetti for being here for the first time. Let us know where you're watching from. Yeah, I was just saying, one of the issues that I have is deciding which of the number of issues that I want to address. I've done women in construction, embodied carbon, drugs and alcohol in the workplace, suicide, mental health. There are so many challenges facing the industry at the moment. It's sometimes hard to know exactly where to begin. Dan Cullen says, I'd say go to the canteen and stay there as you're over the limit for driving. So you'd be partial to blame. You'd be likely to get blamed letting them drive out of the gate. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's very easy to come across as very self-righteous and saying, I'd report them and dob them in, which, is a legitimate answer. But you'd have to think, if somebody is turning up for work to drive a piece of equipment under the influence of drugs or alcohol, I'd be rather more concerned about the underlying issues that led them to do that. Now, okay, some people are just that way inclined, in which case they probably have no place on a demolition or construction site. But if somebody has turned to drink or drugs, is there a reason for that? And is that not the main concern? Does your wife do any camera work? No. My wife actually has an iPhone filled with about, I would estimate, something like 7,000 photographs of people without heads. She is a terrible photographer. Thankfully, she's a good wife, but she's a terrible photographer. So no, she will be in the shopping malls. Doesn't do the casinos, but I will, as she's not here at the moment. I hope she's not watching, but as she's not here at the moment, she was at ConExpo last time around as well. And there is on the strip, on the Las Vegas Boulevard, there is a shopping mall called the Miracle Mile, and it is a mile long. So she took herself off to that on the first day, and just basically walked around the shops, browsing. Didn't buy a great deal, but browsing and everything else. So at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a text message to say, I'm now back at the hotel. I'm in the bar when you're finished. So I finished about 5 o'clock, and sure enough, by about 5:15, I was back at the hotel, and there she was, sat in the hotel bar with a glass of wine in her hand. The following day, I got the text, but this time it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I finally made it back about 5:15, and there she was, sat in the hotel bar with a glass of wine in her hand. Third day, it's 2:30 in the afternoon, and by the final day, she didn't even make it to lunchtime. She spent quite a bit of time in the bar without me, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, she does love Vegas. And I have to say, I mean, I think you, Steve and Ed, are very, very fortunate in the fact that you're doing it with a buddy. I've been doing this job for 33 years now, and I've done things like I went to Universal Studios in Anaheim, California. I was working just up the road for about a week. So one afternoon I took myself off to Universal Studios. I also took myself to Disney during the same trip, but on my own. And I have to be honest, doing those things, I can say I've done it. I've ticked the box. I went on the Jaws ride and everything else. But doing it on your own, you are a bit of a sad sack, I have to say. So doing it, as I say, I think the last ConExpo, I think I decided was probably my 8th. It may have been my 7th, but it may have been my 8th. And I have to say, it was the best one I've done yet. And I'm sure it was because I had my son Fred in tow, and also had my wife as well. Because I've always had this inclination, you do a day at the show, you're talked out, my face aches from pretending to smile, which is not my natural state. And often I would go back to the hotel and just call down to room service, get myself a club sandwich, sit there and watch the TV until I fell asleep. Last time around, literally every night, get back, get showered, get changed, and go out and actually see a bit of Las Vegas. And we're planning to do a whole lot more of that this time around as well. Here is Jim Turner. On site, we have a chain of command. And if you aren't in a position of authority, you report anything dangerous to the next person in the chain of command and let them decide what's to be done. Obviously, if you think they're endangering you, then keep well away from them. I think the presence of drugs and alcohol is very cut and dried. They should not be there. If you are under the influence, you, regardless of the background, regardless of the circumstances, you are in the wrong. Where I think we do get to a grey area is those that are aware but not involved. And I had a long conversation with a guy, it must be about a year ago now, who had seen a couple of guys on his site dealing and using drugs during the day, sort of lunchtime or whatever. And he made up his mind, he thought about it long and hard and made up his mind he was going to go and see the site supervisor and say, these guys are dealing, but they're also doing drugs, they are putting our lives in danger. And on his way to report this to the site supervisor, he walked round the back of one of the site cabins, and there was the site supervisor taking part. So where do you go from there? Do you take that up the line? Do you go to somebody over the site supervisor? And if so, what is the feedback? We've heard so many times in this industry of people being blacklisted purely because they've reported something dangerous. That's not even grasping people up, it's just reporting something dangerous. Let's have a look. Mick Norton says, Tier 1 contractors and other stakeholders know all too well the problems that drugs and alcohol bring to their sites. Sadly, they all appear testicularly challenged and shy away from any punitive action as they fear the sites would lose a great majority of their workforce. And again, I think that plays back to what I was saying earlier. If, as an industry, we are covering for our mates, are we really fully aware of the scale of the problem? There is that, I've mentioned it before in terms of mental health. If you can measure it, you can manage it. But if we're covering up for our friends and colleagues who are under the influence, how big a problem is it? You'll hope you're not sitting in front of myself and Ed on the plane. You'll get no peace and be lots of heavy breathing in your ear. Well, there's something to look forward to. Trust me, you've got no chance, Steve. I get on a plane and I'm usually asleep before the thing even takes off, which drives my wife mad. She's not a bad flyer, but she doesn't particularly like flying. So she tends to sort of grip onto my arm or to the seat in front as we're taking off and as we're landing and everything else. I'm of no use whatsoever. I'm fast asleep. Do you have exhibitor passes to get in before the show? Yes, I do. Because we are working with the folks at Demolition on the day before. The day before the show starts, so we've got to get there bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on the Monday, so that when the big Demolition unveil happens on the Tuesday, we're ready to roll. So yes, we are doing that, and yes, I will be in there before the show begins. What do you think of the war? Says our friend. I still don't know where they are. I don't know how to pronounce their name. Easy answer. It's awful, and they all are. There is. To my mind, there is no justifiable war, and there hasn't been one in history. It's driven by not by good against evil. It is just, we should know better, is my easy answer on that. Dan Cohen, question today. Had an agency call me and told me to remove a guy from my groups who I know. He goes through different companies, agencies, and he's always looking for work, but he lost them their client due to going to site off his face with alcohol. And he is known to many, and he refuses to cut down alcohol, but says he'd rather drink than work. That's the sort of guy that does need reporting, I would say. Because he is quite clearly a danger to himself, and he's not looking to mend his ways, is he? sad to say, asleep, we'll sort that out. You've got no chance. I say sleep, it's more like a coma, to be perfectly honest with you. No, in actual fact, I mean, because of the timing of the flight, I probably get a couple of movies in, and I'm still teaching myself some video editing techniques as well. So the laptop is primed and ready to go. So I should probably be doing a bit of that on the plane as well. Dan Cullen, but he goes to jobs to manage money to afford it. He actually said this to someone I know, and I know him. He can't hold jobs. Between when I left school and when I went to college, I worked in a newsagent's. Only got the job because my mum worked there back in the day, but I worked in a newsagent's, and there was a guy who was he was a proper full-on alcoholic. He used to come in with sort of this mad hair on top of his head and could literally barely walk in a straight line, would fall over on a regular basis, dishevelled and everything else. And this guy was a barrister. And you would see him 2, 3, 4 days on the trot, completely off his face. As I say, you'd often find him literally asleep on the street where he'd fallen over, and that, covered in leaves, that was where he'd landed. And then every once in a while, he would arrive, pick up his copy of the Times, suited, booted, hair done. You'd never know. You would never, ever know. But I call it a functioning alcoholic. And I'm sure we have a few of those in our midst as well. Mick Norton says a core problem with urine testing for drugs and alcohol is that samples are extremely susceptible to tampering, such as the dilution of urine or the use of an adulterant. Tampering is a tempting option for those undergoing a test. I found that interesting, actually. When I was at HS2 last week, we went through an initial induction, so filling out details, had to take passport to prove we were who we said we were and everything else. And we were then given a pot, but it was in a sealed, like a hermetically sealed package that you had to literally cut open. It's quite strong, like polythene on it. And you went in for the medical. I had to give 6 fingerprints, and was then told, right, okay, we're going to the loo. And the woman that was doing the test actually followed me to the loo. And I had to keep the door ajar while I was doing what needed to be done. And I handed her the jar, and she was literally stood an inch outside the door. So I think the authorities quite clearly are aware of this idea of adulteration and tampering and whatever. But I do wonder just how seriously some sites take it. Do I speak Russian? No, I barely speak English, I'm afraid. No, I don't speak Russian. Don't speak any languages at all. Although, and I have to share this with you because you are all friends here, I have been binge watching the TV series Stanley Tucci. Really good actor, but also, as it turns out, a really good bloke. Stanley Tucci, Searching for Italy, where Stanley Tucci, who I'm sure many of you know, is going around the various, I think it's 20 regions of Italy, eating food. Man alive. Oh, 2 things. Man alive, what a fantastic job. What fantastic food. And second, watching somebody switching so readily from English to Italian. Years ago, I used to have this notion that I would teach myself Italian. Never got around to it, never felt the need, but I would love to do it. And having watched that series, maybe that's what I should be doing on the plane. Maybe I should get myself a Teach Yourself Italian tape. They still do tapes? Probably not, but I'll probably get something as an app or what have you on my phone. I'd love to be able to speak Italian. Really, I'd love to be able to speak Spanish as well. I've mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. Barcelona, my favourite city in the world. I'd love to, and I realise Catalan is slightly different to, very different to Spanish, but I'd love to be able to go to somewhere like Barcelona and just converse with the locals as a local. One of these days, and it is an ambition of mine, I've written a couple of books in the past and always done them from home. I would love to go to Barcelona, just tuck myself away in an apartment overlooking Las Ramblas maybe, and just sit there with a typewriter, proper old school typewriter, and just clatter away all day until I'd written a book. Never going to happen because I'd be distracted by paella and stuff. But, hey, you can dream, can't you? Right, people, it's time for me to go and do something else. I will be over on Instagram at 2:30 this afternoon if you fancy a bit more of a natter. Really appreciate your input on things like drugs and alcohol, because that's one of the points that I'm going to be talking about today. Totally unscripted, that part. I just go on Instagram Live, see who pitches up and see where the conversation takes us. Not dissimilar to this part of the show, to be perfectly honest. So if you fancy a bit of that, then 2:30 at over on Instagram, and we are at Demolition_news if you fancy joining us for that. Failing that, back here tomorrow for, let me see, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. One of the last 3 shows this side of ConExpo. And we do have plenty more to show you as well. So if you would like to join us, you'd be more than welcome. I shall see you very, very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you do see any of your friends under the influence of drugs and alcohol, do take them to one side. Maybe ask them why. If you can get any sense out of them, ask them why. Because it's not the sort of thing that you do just on the spur of the moment, is it? Everybody, have a fantastic day. Look after yourselves. I'll see you all very soon. All the best.